Okay, let's open the meeting. We're right on time at 8 o'clock.
Morning.
Okay.
I'm supposed to read this legal statement.
Marty or Mr. Sultan, may I start with the board secretary statement and then we'll flow into the opening of the meeting and the legal statement.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open this meeting and explain the rules for this electronic meeting. Please keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if the microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure the microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me at any time, 540-336-3948 during the meeting if you need technical support, and an IT tech will call your cell phone to assist. After the chairman finishes, I'll take a roll call of the committee attendees. And I now turn the meeting over to Chairman Sultan.
Okay, here's the legal statement. In accordance with the governor's state of emergency declaration and executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Continuity Ordinance and General Assembly 2020 Budget Amendments 28 and 137, Loudoun Water will meet today in an electronic meeting. In compliance with these special procedures, only action items necessary to continue operations of Loudoun Water and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities will be discussed during today's meeting. Reports and other meeting information are available in board docs. Public notice and meeting access information was provided on the Loudoun Water website. A recording of the meeting will be available in board docs at the following link: goboarddocs.com VA/LWVA/board.nsf. Board members wishing to speak are reminded to press unmute. It is recommended to show video or use the hand raise feature when making comments to allow staff to accurately capture comments. All items will be recommended to the September 10th, 2020 board meeting. Here's we should have a roll call to approve the meeting agenda.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Bonfils?
Approve.
Mr. Sultan?
Approve.
Mr. Moody? Mr. Moody? Ms. Sursakar? All right, the motion is approved with Mr. Moody and Ms. Sursakar absent for the vote.
Okay, let's move ahead with the first action item, the award of civil engineering and surveying services, BOAs.
All right.
Ryan?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just waiting for Michael to get it loaded up, and then I'll request control.
There we are. We've got it up on the screen.
Certainly.
Okay, I'm not seeing it just yet.
Hold on just one moment. We have it up on the screen. Do you see it now?
No.
No, don't see it yet.
Bear with us. Michael is. Good morning, Mr. Kelly.
We got it.
Here we go.
Thank you.
All right, Michael. Yeah, I'm going to request control now, Michael.
Morning, Joel.
Morning, Mr. Kelly. Thank you.
Okay, I think you've got this on the presentation mode, Michael, so I'll get started. I want to start by just saying good morning to the CIP committee. Hope you've had a nice summer so far, and hope you've been staying safe. It's coming to a close. It's been a couple months since we've talked. So I look forward to presenting this to you and talking a little bit more about it. My first, Michael, it's not moving. There we go. The first presentation here is a little bit about our civil engineering and surveying services basic ordering agreements. So as I go through this, I'm going to talk to you about what a basic ordering agreement, or a BOA, that's the acronym that we often use for expediency, what that is, how we use those, what types we have in place, the Virginia Public Procurement Act requirements related to engineering services and BOAs. I'm going to talk a little bit about the selection process and timeline, and then at the end of the presentation, I have a recommended motion. Okay, so what is a basic ordering agreement, or a BOA? It's simply an on-call contract mechanism. The services that we hope to procure under this BOA will be described later in individual task orders. Some people call this type of a contract an on-call contract or a task order contract. Okay. The basic ordering agreement itself is simply the terms and conditions between the parties. We have defined terms, insurance requirements, the task order process is described, the claims, disputes, payment and provisions, and the reporting requirements are given there. Task orders that are written under the BOA, which will be at a later date, will describe the scope of the work, the deliverables, the performance schedule, and the engineering fee. It's awfully slow here, Michael. Okay, there we go. Together, the basic ordering agreement and the task orders will form the contract. So I want to make it clear to you that we're not asking for money under this presentation. We're just simply asking for the approval to award basic ordering agreements to 4 separate firms. And these would be for the civil BOAs. The task orders will, again, come at a later date. So what types of BOAs do we presently have in place? Other than the civil BOA, we also have basic ordering agreements for environmental work and for community systems projects. The environmental BOAs are used primarily for larger projects such as treatment plant projects, pump stations, major water and sewer projects. The environmental and community systems BOAs will expire early in 2021. The civil BOAs expired last month. We have 3 civil BOAs that expired: Rummel, Klepper and Call, J2, and Christopher Consultants. So what is a civil BOA and how is it used? The civil BOA is primarily for projects where the primary services are closely related to what you would find in the land development industry, including planning, permitting, surveying, design, and some construction support. I'm going to pause as I go through these if you have any questions as well.
No, I'm good.
Okay. This is a little bit about the past 5 years and how we've used the civil BOAs. We've issued 58 task orders over the past 5 years. The cumulative value of those task orders is $3.2 million. The average task order value is $55,000 and the median value has been $29,000. So half of the task orders are actually greater than $29,000 and the other half are less than $29,000. So that gives you a little bit of idea of the size of most of our task orders. Task orders that include permitting, surveying, and design work made up the bulk of the services that we procured through the civil BOAs over the past 5 years. We had some planning and study support work, a little bit of construction phase services, and then we had some miscellaneous work as well, which included plan review to support our land development department. The Virginia Public Procurement Act includes 3 provisions that govern how we are to procure engineering services and the selection process. I'm going to be talking mostly about the requirements under 4302.2, which is the first row. The procurement has to be through an RFP process, has to be qualifications based, and the scoring system has to be included in the RFP itself. I'm going to show you how we accomplished all of that and complied with that. The engineering services that we award through the task orders has to be through a competitive negotiation. It cannot be price-based. And okay, there we go. And the last provision there, 4303.1, includes allows authorities like Loudon Water to issue multiple contracts to multiple firms to cover multiple projects, which is what we're talking about here with our basic ordering agreement. The basic ordering agreement is for 1 year only, but it can be renewed for 4 one-year periods after that. So it can be as much as 5 years, but not more than that. And we do have the fee limits given there for the BOAs, which, as I showed you earlier in the slide, we will not come close to approaching those limits under this program. Okay, so in early 2020, we formed a 5-person selection committee that provided input on the RFP and developed the evaluation criteria. The evaluation criteria is given there. That was a scoring matrix. It was included in the RFP so that firms could address each one of those in their proposal. We began in early January. We issued the RFP or advertised it in mid-February. We received 13 proposals in April, and the selection committee began their evaluation at that point and then submitted scoring sheets and had a discussion in late May. And then in early July, the selection committee interviewed 6 firms and then finalized the selection, which we are putting before you now. So again, the firms on the left are the expired BOAs, and then on the right are the ones that we're proposing to be the new BOAs. We're proposing that we issue BOA to Rummel, Klepper, and Call and J2. So it will be a continuation for us. For them, it's just a new BOA, but they've already been working for us under the old civil BOA. Dewberry has a community systems BOA under us now. With us, and so the BOA process is not going to be new for them. The new firm for us is Wallace Montgomery. They're based out of Maryland, but they have a local office in Vienna. They do quite a bit of work for WSSC, and as we reviewed their proposal and talked to them more, we felt that they would be a really good fit for us. We're recommending awarding BOAs to these 4 firms. Again, this is just for 1 year. With 4 renewable years after that at our discretion for 5 years total. And then lastly, I have a recommended motion, and I'd like to entertain any questions you have.
Jim, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions at this time.
I have a couple of questions.
Mr. Sultan, Mr. Koblis has a question. I just wanted to let you know.
Oh, let him go first.
I was just curious, Brian, why Christopher Consultants wasn't picked.
Well, after we went through the proposals and went through the interview, we did talk to them. We felt it was better to select somebody else. I mean, it really was, you know, it was just part of the selection that they were not selected, part of the process.
Okay.
If you're through, I'll have a couple of questions. Plan review. I assume that the plan review is not of any plans generated by any of these companies.
No, it will not be. No, it's just to support the needs in the land development department if it arises. But that's a very good question, but we will not allow them. If they did plan review for us, they would not be reviewing their own work, no.
I figured you guys were smart enough not to do that.
Right. No, that's a very good question because that would be a conflict of interest.
Absolutely. what does it refer to when you talk about change management?
How they're able to deal with change during the course of a project. You know, if the scope changes direction, how do they go about rescoping something and providing information to us about what they propose to deliver the project or to incorporate those changes.
All right, I have one other question. If you give them a task that extends beyond the 1-year time period, do you automatically renew, or how does that work?
Well, if the work extends beyond the 1-year time frame, that we would certainly understand that. Yes, we would extend for that for sure. But you know, please understand that if the likelihood of us not renewing is pretty low. I mean, we have the ability in our contract to terminate as well, or to simply not award task orders if they have not performed well. So, but the likelihood of simply not renewing is pretty low. But we would certainly consider that as for tasks that extend beyond 1 year.
You know, when I was with Fairfax, we used BOAs to a good extent, and I think it's a good idea. Jim, I'll defer to you, but I would move the recommended motion for consent.
Mr. Sultan, Mr. Moe has his hand up.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to also clarify to what Brian was saying, that if we issue a task order in the year of the.
I can't hear Roddy.
I'm sorry, let me try. Is it better now? I have to get up on the mic, I guess.
Is that hello?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, my apologies. I was just going to add that, you know, there are times when we may issue a task order in the final year of the particular BOA, and if it's been awarded, then the work will continue until it's been completed. So,
Yeah.
So there's no real risk in that.
Okay. Jim, you have any problem with it going for consent?
I will make that motion that this go on consent.
And I second the motion.
All right, and Mr. Koblis, did you have another question? I see that your hand is still up, so I just wanted to. Nope, okay. All right, I am going to take a roll call vote on this item. Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Moody, Ms. Sursakar,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
all right. Carries to consent with Mr. Moody absent for the vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the support on this.
Okay, let's go to the next action item. Community Systems Ammonia Removal Evaluation.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All
Yes,
right, great. So good morning, everybody. I'm here today to seek approval of award of a task order to Black & Veatch for the Community Systems Ammonia Removal Evaluation. There we go. So this slide might be familiar to you. Kinsey presented this back, I think, in the February CIP meeting earlier this year. And it just kind of shows in broad strokes the plan or the timeline that Virginia put in place to adopt some freshwater ammonia criteria that was put forward by the EPA in 2013. So the state plans to approve the implementation plan this year, and the first Loudon Water Community System plant that will see a new ammonia limit will start in the 2023 permit and renewal cycles. So we are undertaking this study in order to prepare for discussions with DEQ during the permit renewal, and also to prepare and to plan for what upgrades will be needed to the plants that'll be affected by this new limit. So there are 6 plants that we have that are affected by this. These are all surface discharge community wastewater facilities. And the plants are Waterford, Skills, Raspberry, Elysian Heights, Aldi, and St. Louis. So they're scattered around the county. And just like scattered around the county, there's no one size fits all to these plants. So they're all different. We have 2 lagoon facilities, which each have a different number of lagoons, and they also have different discharge strategies. And the remaining 4 plants are extended aeration plants, all with their own unique process configurations. The plants were also built by different entities. So St. Louis, Waterford, and Aldi were built by the county, and the remaining plants were built by developers. And because of that, there's not much consistency between the plants, which reduces the efficiency in O&M. So this is one of the key things that we want to be looking at is as we're moving forward through this study and facing these newer limits. So in addition to the varied process configurations, there's also a big range in flow. So the smallest plant is about 4,200 gallons per day, and the largest is 165,000 gallons per day, and they were built over a span of 27 years. So currently our 10-year CIP includes $12.4 million for upgrades to 3 of the plants, Aldi, Waterford, and St. Louis. And so as part of this study, we're going to refine the numbers for construction and design for those plants, as well as develop the budgetary numbers for the remaining 3 plants and include those in the upcoming CIP, or I guess the 2022 CIP. So what's included in this scope of work? There's a number of things that are typically done for an evaluation of this type, like regulatory analysis, data review, and a condition assessment for each one of the facilities. But then we've also added some additional things like a sampling plan. We've requested Black & Veatch help us develop a comprehensive sampling plan for each facility so that Loudon Water can spend the next year sampling at each of the facilities in preparation for the upcoming designs. After these early tasks are done, then Black & Veatch will move into an alternatives analysis, and they'll develop 4 alternatives for each facility for a total of 24 scenarios to be evaluated. From there, Loudon Water will then rank the scenarios, and the top 2 will be selected to move forward for additional analysis, including life cycle costs and capital costs. So why did we decide to look at do 1 large study instead of 6 smaller studies? Well, ultimately, we felt that there are a lot of benefits in taking a programmatic approach to looking at these plants together. For one, it provides a consistent analysis across all of the plants and economies of scale for doing multiple facilities at the same time. It also allows us to look at the design and construction needs for each plant, the phasing, but also as each plant relates to each other. And then ultimately, when we look at the plants as a group, we can hopefully find some commonalities in the design, which will help us with long-term operations and maintenance. Are there any questions?
Not for me.
Okay. So after board approval of this task order, yeah, I see a question.
Hello, Savita. So
Yes.
I had a question for you. So
Sure.
I understand that you decided to do just one big study as opposed to doing 6 small studies, and I'm trying to collect the benefit of that. The question I want to pose to you is, so why say 6 small studies as opposed to just one big study? I mean, was there like a reason for saying 6 studies? I mean, I'm trying to understand.
Sure. So the reason that we decided to do it this way is that each of these plants are different, which requires additional O&M, right? And so what we want to do is try and look at it on a broader scale to see if there are things that in the future, as these plants need go to design and need upgrades, we can try and standardize across the plants. Does that make sense? then we can also phase the design and construction among the plants as they're needed to meet the new permit renewals.
Okay, so as they're needed to meet the new permit.
Yeah,
Okay, okay,
yeah.
that-
So we don't want to look at it on a case by case basis because they're all going to meet. They may not have the exact same permit limit, but we want to have the discussions with DEQ, and we want to be able to sort of streamline these plants a little bit more.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, that does answer my question. Thank you, Savita. Please carry on.
Okay, so after board approval of the of this task order, it'll take approximately a year or so to finish the evaluation, and then we plan to move into a design. Of course, this will be dependent on what the alternatives analysis shows us at the end, towards the end of the study. So we negotiated a task order budget with Black & Veatch for $290,000, which comes out to approximately $48,000 per facility. And this goes a little bit towards the economies of scale discussion that I mentioned before. We feel that looking at these plants together actually results in a lower overall fee than if we were doing an individual study for each one of these plants. And with that, I have a recommended motion in front of you. And if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
I don't have any. Does the committee have any?
I'll move the recommended motion for consent.
I second that.
Very good. All right, I'll take a roll call vote on this item. Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Moody, Ms. Sursakar,
Yes.
Mr. Sultan.
Yes.
Carries with Mr. Moody absent for the vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next item for construction services for Cortland.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, it looks like I have control here. Great. So today I will be presenting a request for authorization for an amendment to Hazen and Sawyer's construction phase services task order on the Cortland Permanent Pump Station project. Here's an agenda for today's presentation. I'll start off with project status and background, followed by the construction services spending to date. Then I'll discuss variances in the assumed scope under Hazen's task order, followed by costs to complete. Then I'll provide a brief cost comparison across other Loudoun water projects, followed by a recommendation for the board. So the Cortland construction contract was awarded to Sargent Corporation back in March of 2019 for a value of just under $3.9 million. The construction duration is 27 months. And with that, we issued a notice to proceed in May of 2019. That projects final completion out to September of 2021. And as of today, we are through 55% of the total contract time to final completion. Here are a couple photos of the progress to date out on site. The photo on the left is of the pump station structure itself. Work's been largely focused on the exterior of the building, which is nearing completion, and that will allow work to progress to the interior of that space. The photo on the right here is the interior of the accompanying electrical building. Works a little bit further along in that building. As you can see, the contractor has started installing electrical gear and control panels there. With that, I will transition to the construction phase services task order under this project. The table shown here is a breakdown of the task order scope and fee that was originally presented to and approved by the board in March of 2019. With that approval, we issued a task order to Hazen and Sawyer for $215,000, which represents 5.6% of the total construction contract value. In addition to that $215,000 task order, the board also authorized 11 grand in contingency. Now, fast forward to the end of June of this year, and we have actually exceeded our budgets for submittal review, as well as requests for clarifications, claims, and change management. As you can see here, spent through June, we have spent 116% of the submittal review budget, and we're at 119% of the RFC budget. Now, the remaining scope under this task order has been spent out to 54%, which is on track with where we are in the construction schedule. Unfortunately, with the submittal and RFC overruns, we are nearing exhaustion on the total task order fee, which is shown there on the last line. Now I'll dive into the submittal and RFC overruns a little further. The table here shows the status of submittals. The first line are the budgeted quantities that were included in the original task order for Hazen. We assume 215 total submittals on the project at a review time of 3.5 hours per submittal, a billing rate of $138 per hour, which got us to our total fee of $104,000. Now, through June, Hazen has actually reviewed 242 submittals, which is over the total estimated quantity. The review time and billing rates are generally in line with what we anticipated, but due to that increased submittal count, we are at a incurred fee of $121,000. And with that, Mr. Kobus, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, you keep saying we budgeted. Who is we, and why is Loudon Water budgeting the time? Why didn't the contractor or the consultant budget the time?
So you're right, and that's maybe my mistake for speaking that way. Hazen does present a budget to us, and that's something that is negotiated. But yes, they are providing that information. Unfortunately, here we did not account for enough, and I think there's a number of reasons for that, but it really just comes down to the assumptions that we made, and it was lacking.
Well, I'm gonna need to hear what those assumptions were and why it was lacking, but I'm sure you're gonna get to that in your presentation.
Sure. I tell you what. Let me go through just another minute here, and then I'll dive back into that. Okay. So just to wrap up this submittal table here, based on the contractor's current submittal schedule, we are now projecting a revised total submittal count of 315 submittals, and carrying through the metrics that we've seen to date, that produces a revised fee of around $157,500, which represents a 53 grand increase from the original budget. And Mr. Cole, was just to kind of dive back into that. I think ultimately my answer would be incomplete without saying that we should have requested more when we first came forward. There have been a number of factors that have led to that submittal increase. We have seen a larger number of resubmittals than were budgeted, and there is actually 25 grand in submittal review fees that is currently reimbursable by the contractor due to the number of resubmittal iterations that they've submitted. So that's a portion of that. It also partially is due to the way the contractor has packaged their submittals. Hazen makes an assumption with how they're going to receive those submittals, and ultimately we saw those packaged a little differently and broken out in more individual components. So that drove the number up some. Due to COVID, we did have a couple material shortages, which resulted in resubmittals for previously approved materials. So we did have a couple, I'll say, re-reviews there, which may add to that number a little bit. But ultimately, the assumption that was made in the original task order was incomplete, and frankly, we should have come forward with a higher count there.
Again, you keep saying we. the contractor is the one that made the mistake on the amount of submittals, and he has total control on the amount of submittals. I don't understand this one.
So
you're saying you need $75,000 more because you got 25,000 from the contractor, and now you want another 53,000. I don't know. I just don't get it.
I'm sorry I keep saying we, and that's I guess my manner of speak here, and I apologize for that. The budgeted assumption is something Hazen produces, and that is before the contractor has submitted their final submittal schedule, and that is taken straight from the specs, and the submittal's included in there. And the Hazen makes an assumption how they're going to receive that count on submittals and how those are going to be packaged. And there seemed to be a discrepancy in how the contractor ultimately submitted those submittals. I don't think I'm going to be able to fully answer your question, but that would be my attempt to explain that.
So
Let me jump in here.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing, Mark. We don't know how many submittals the contractor is planning to submit at the time that we present the construction services task order. They provide to us a schedule of their submittals after they begin construction, after the contract has been awarded to them. So that's not the kind of information that we know in advance.
The engineer should know how many submittals he's going to get. And the engineer also is in charge of how the submittals are presented to them. If he doesn't like the way the contractor is providing submittals, he can ask them to provide it in the way that they have specified in their specifications.
Well, the specifications do not dictate how they're to package the submittals, but they typically package those in a way that benefits them most. And in some cases, they will submit things individually as opposed to packaging them with like materials or all the materials from one supplier. So we end up getting a lot of times a lot more submittals than we would have ever really expected. But that's up to them to determine how to package it, because we want them to package it in a way that works best for them and provides the most efficiency for them. And so that's why we don't get into dictating that.
Yeah, but now we're paying for it.
Well, it does create
I
don't
understand why we can't be in control, and now we have to pay another $50,000 just because they submitted in a way that Hazen and Sawyer couldn't handle.
It's not that they can't handle it. It's just not as efficient on the review and on the engineer's side as it would be otherwise. And so we typically don't get into that with our contracts because it's a means and methods thing, and we don't like to dictate means and methods.
But we're paying for it.
Well, in this case,
we can dictate means and methods when it affects us.
Well, we want it to be the most efficient for the contractor to keep the construction price down as well. And so that's the thinking there, that we don't dictate means and methods for this.
Yeah. All right.
Mr. Sursaskar has a question, Eric.
Yep. Go ahead.
I don't have a question, but I'm listening to the conversation between you and Mark, and I see a lot of, a lot of verbiage in there where there's a lot of inefficiencies. There's lots of benefiting, another party. So I've just been silently listening to that and comprehending that. What I would like to pose as a member on the board is I would like to pose that if you could take in our queries and our questions and concerns and our comments and be able to sufficiently answer those, because yes, in the end, Mark is right. We are paying for that. So all our questions should be sufficiently answered, and that, then we are able to move, with this motion across the board. So I don't have a question, as I said. Again, I want to just say that please take into consideration our questions, comments, and concerns and be able to sufficiently answer those. So that is just something that I have a concern with right now. Thank you.
Okay.
If I could interject, this is Roddy. I apologize. Can you hear me okay now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to add a couple of things. One is that, you know, obviously there was from the get-go, there was a little bit of a discrepancy in the budgeted amount. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but this was actually presented previously and rejected with a higher budget amount. So we did go back and ask Hazen to cut the number down to get approval at the onset. So that's one thing that probably plays into the numbers. The other thing is that if when we get to the end of this presentation, you're going to see that it is very well in alignment with, even with this increase, with our typical budgets for projects like this. So I think in the end it lands in a decent place. But we will certainly, you know, this is up to you all, obviously, if you ask us to go back and do this differently. But I just want to make sure that that's understood, and I think others on the call may be able to provide a little more of the background on the numbers.
So it's
Sarah-
not only the background on the numbers. I'm not done here yet. So it's not the only concern that I have is that the background on the numbers. The numbers will always be there. What we need to understand is we need to understand the reasoning behind those numbers. We need to understand the constraints behind those numbers, the expectancies and unexpectancies behind those numbers. That's where I am having a difficult time understanding this. Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Lothman has her hand up.
Good morning. Hey, I just wanted to clarify. Roddy was talking about originally this task order came forward, and it did. It came forward, and the request was about just over $250,000. That was reduced by just over $40,000 in the following month when it was presented. And I think, you know, Ms. Ursakar, to your question around efficiencies, there are a lot of assumptions that go into building up, you know, again, how the submittals come in, how much time it will take to review a submittal, you know, what are the repeat assumptions around repeat submittals, and you know, there's a best estimate that is made of what that could be, but ultimately we're having to adapt to that. So we also go back and look at historical projects, so projects that we have had that are similar to this, and really try to understand what the level of effort was on those, and extrapolate to try to make some best assumptions in projecting these types of services on future projects. I don't know if that helps at all, but just wanted to provide that context.
Mr. Koblis has his hand up.
Yeah, I remember this extremely well because this is one of my nightmare projects from having too high. And what's funny, I was very happy that we were reducing it, and now it sounds like we're just putting it back in. And this is, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Okay, well, with all that said, I think I'll press forward on the presentation here, and then when we get to the recommended motion, maybe we can open up this discussion again and determine the path forward, the appropriate path forward. So with that, I will move on to the similar table here for RFCs and claims. There were originally 26 RFCs and claims budgeted in Hazen's task order for a total fee of $26,000. Through June, Hazen has received and reviewed 39 separate RFCs, which is above the budgeted quantity by Hazen. But the review time and billing rates are actually a little bit under what was carried in that original task order. But due to that increased quantity, the fee incurred to date has crept up to $31,000 above that $26,000 original budget. Based on the rate that the contractor has submitted RFCs, we are now projecting a revised total of 60 RFCs on this project. And carrying that through, we're looking at about a $49,000 revised fee, which is an increase of $23,000. This table summarizes the information presented on the last few slides. we are proposing an amendment for $76,500 to cover the additional submittal and RFC costs. We're not looking for any additional funding on the remaining task order scope. And with that proposed amendment, the revised fee would be $291,500. Here that is summarized again. That $291,500 would now represent 7.5% of the construction contract value. Now, how does that compare across other Loudon Water projects? Well, the table here lists major construction projects that have either been completed in the last couple of years or are currently ongoing. And as a general metric, the construction phase services costs are generally between 7 to 10% of the total construction contract value. And again, with this amendment, the Hazen task order for Cortland would be 7.5%.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
This is Marty. I have a question. What part of this overrun are the RFCs? Because if we got a large number of RFCs, more than anticipated, that might point toward some kind of deficiency in the plans.
Yeah, that is a good question. Again, I think that there was not nearly enough RFCs carried in the original budget. I don't think that the number of RFCs submitted to date points to any negligence in the design documents. Honestly, I think that is generally in line with some similar projects that we've received. It's more than we anticipated, and it's really a mistake in what we were carrying in the original budget. I believe on the Brambleton project listed here on this table, I believe that there were actually 75 RFCs budgeted under that task order. And I believe they have received in the upper 60s on RFC. So it's something we missed, and that's shame on us when we were putting together that task order.
I would like to see the figures, not now, but maybe at the board meeting, the figures on how many RFCs were budgeted and how many we actually received. You hear me?
Eric,
Yeah, yep,
Eric,
I'm
I think
just
that
making
was
a
on
note here.
was that
Yeah.
not on the previous slide?
Was it? Did I miss that?
So
yeah, the actuals.
so in the first column here, the
Oh,
quantity.
there it is. Okay.
Yep. Does that answer
Okay.
your question?
I see it. I have one other question on that same slide.
Yes.
Maybe it's me, but you show a budgeted rate of $138 per hour, and then you show actual of 147, and then you say that's on budget. That seems like a conflict.
It is a little bit higher. You'll note that the review time is nominally lower as well. Again, that is an assumption based on the level of staff that is working on the submittal reviews. And we were a little bit over there, but in my opinion, I think that's within an appropriate range for that. And you'll note that the rate for RFCs is in fact a little bit lower than what we anticipated. But you're right, that is a little bit higher.
All right, I don't have
Okay.
any other questions. Anybody else have questions?
So with that, thanks, Mr. Sultan. With that, why is this amendment needed? Well, again, it's to cover the cost to complete the submittal and RFC reviews on this project. And in doing so, we'll continue to ensure quality work by the contractor. And by continuing to engage Hazen in the administration of construction, we preserve Loudon Water's indemnification protection. There are any number of paths forward, as was discussed earlier in this presentation. We have two suggested paths forward for the board today, and we can certainly expand on this discussion. The first would be our recommended approach to issue a task order amendment for $76,500 and keep the original 11 grand contingency in place. Conversely, if it's more agreeable to the board, we could issue a task order amendment for $65,500 and release the 11 grand contingency to cover that gap. And with that, I have my final recommended motion here to the board requesting that full $76,500 amendment, preserving the 11 grand contingency. So with all that being said, I know there was a lot discussed at this meeting. I will open it up to the floor for any final discussion points or questions that you may have for me.
I think that this item should go to the board for action item, because I think there's additional discussion needs to be done, including whether to go with the 76 or the other figure. How does the rest of the committee feel?
I agree with you on that, Marty. I too feel the same. So thank you for addressing that for me. I would speak for myself. So I'm on board with you. I think this should, in my opinion, go for an action item. Thank you.
Yep, thanks. So
Jim,
enter.
Jim,
Go ahead. Sorry.
Jim, what about you?
Well, I think we should, it should go to the full board to be discussed there. The question is, do we want to send it with a recommendation or with no recommendation? And I feel that we just send it to the board with no recommendation.
I fully agree with you.
Okay.
Hi, this is Keith Moody. I just had one question. We were talking about the overages. Just curious, is there a standard variance that's identified to determine whether something's considered an overage or not when you were talking about the rates for the RFCs?
I don't know that we have done that analysis as far as the standard variance across projects. That would be something I'd have to look into further.
Okay.
So I guess before we move, the board moves here, just outside of the discussions that we've had today, is there anything different or additional that you would like to see presented for the full board meeting that would assist in this decision process?
I can't think of anything. How about Mark? Do you have anything? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Mark.
So I think we should show where we started on this, what we changed originally, and now we're going back to what we started with before. I'd also like to feel like maybe the $25,000 is not enough to be taken from the contractor. I mean, I think that Hazen and Sawyer ought to really look and say, hey, we usually, I know we have a thing in our contract that says we'll review it and then we'll back review it, but on the second back check, then the contractor pays for it, or we get an extra. As far as the RFCs, I don't ever have a problem with RFCs. That's just totally out of everybody's control. And 9 times out of 10, it's not an issue with the drawings. It's an issue with the contractor's interpretation of trying to do something that's not quite on the drawings. And I don't have a problem with that side. It's just on the submittal side. That's my suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
I can address some of that. Hey, Mark, we have a provision in our contract that it's the same as yours, that beyond the first resubmittal, there's a back charge of $1,000 for each review. So we have that similar provision in this contract, and that's where the $25,000 comes from.
Well, do we have a motion? If not, I would recommend that we move this motion to the full board for an action item.
Second.
Roll call.
Thank you. I'll take a roll call vote on the Cortland item. Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar,
Yes.
and Mr. Sultan.
Yes.
Unanimous, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Let's move on to the presentation on the joint plan management area, master plan.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to kick this off and then turn it over to Kathleen for the presentation, but I just wanted to provide a little background. If you recall, back in June of last year, the Board of Supervisors adopted their revised comp plan. And in that plan, there were two major changes for Loudon Water in our service area. One was that a portion of the rural policy area was brought into the transition policy area and therefore would be served by central utilities. The second part was that Loudon Water is now the presumed provider for undeveloped areas of Leesburg's Joint Land Management Area, or JLMA. And within that language, there's a caveat that if the developer cannot reach an agreement with Loudon Water, or if Loudon Water refuses to serve, they can then go to the town and be served by the town. So that's created a little bit of a hurdle. It's a little confusing when you give choices. But Kathleen will share with you on her maps these two areas so that you can see where they fall. So after that comp plan was adopted, we went to work immediately master planning for these two new areas. And if you'll recall, we had originally planned on doing this presentation in March as an information item. And then we got hit with the pandemic. So we sent out information in one of our weekly updates. It was the June 5th update, if you want to go back to that, where we sent the report and the presentation that was going to go at that time. And so the purpose of today's presentation is really to review the planning effort that we've gone through and talk to you about the steps forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Kathleen, and feel free to ask any questions as we go. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, wanted to wait. I just want to make sure Kathleen talks about that thing that we texted back and forth about Microsoft going with Leesburg in the first section. I know it was just a quick text, but maybe she could go into detail of why we're not doing that.
That's actually not, that's not part of this specifically, but that portion of Microsoft's campus, they were in talks with Leesburg about serving that before we sort of came into the picture. I think it's important too that Microsoft understands that Leesburg service is right there right now. And so you probably did read in the paper that Microsoft will serve, Town of Leesburg will serve phase 2 of Microsoft's project, but we are in discussions with Microsoft for future phases. So I know that Kathleen doesn't have that specifically, but she will show you on the map where that is and why that worked out the way it did. But certainly if you have any more questions, we're happy to answer them. Kathleen, you ready?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Well, good morning. I'm Kathleen Witten, if you haven't met me yet. And I am just starting to be the program manager for this JLMA area and how we're going to move forward. So first, I wanted to start and just kind of talk about what is the Joint Land Management Area. So the JLMA is an area between a town and rural policy area that the town traditionally can serve with utilities. So there's joint land management areas around Leesburg, around Purcellville, around Hamilton. So it's not just specific to Leesburg. However, because our central system is adjacent to the town of Leesburg, that's the one that we're talking about today. So shown on the map in yellow is our central service area. This was before the comprehensive plan was amended last summer. And the orange shaded area is where the joint land management area is. And so traditionally, if a developer came in and wanted to connect to central service in one of those areas, they would go to the town of Leesburg and ask if they could be connected before they came to us. So I want to point out here that much of the Leesburg JLMA is already built out. All this portion up here by the Potomac River is already connected to the town of Leesburg service. So what changed? So with the Loudoun County Comprehensive Plan Amendment being approved last year, like Carla said, they expanded a portion of the transition policy area. So in blue here is the new area that was changed from rural policy area to transition policy area. It's right on the edge of our 538 zone near the landfill service area and the town of Leesburg's airport, or the Leesburg airport up here. In addition, the plan also changed the presumed wastewater utility provider in this area of the JLMA. This is the area that is mainly not built out yet. Our Goose Creek Industrial Park Community System is actually inside of this area, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So here's a different map. So this is an aerial image of the JLMA area, and you can see in yellow highlight is the JLMA that we were showing on the last slide, and then the white is the new transition policy area that we were showing on the last slide. And the area, it's fairly large. It includes residential, commercial, data centers, parks, quarry operations. So it's got a wide variety of different uses going on. And just to acclimate yourself, Trap Rock is right here, close to the edge of our central service area. And you can see the blue lines on this map are our existing water utilities. So there's really not much built out on this side close to the JLMA currently. So there are a couple portions of the JLMA that aren't being considered for Loudoun Water Service because they already have the town of Leesburg service. And there are also some other areas that we are not going to serve because they're either quarry or they're currently under construction and will be served by the town of Leesburg. This area here in the middle, it was served by the town of Leesburg. That's the this new soccer field. So we're assuming that we won't be serving there either because they're already connected. So like Carla said, we have been in discussions with some developers already. Mark was asking about the Microsoft parcel, and that's actually this dark blue one. And the comprehensive plan basically stated that the change in presumed utility provider would occur with any new connections after the plan was approved. So Microsoft had already gotten approved plans through the county and the town of Leesburg for their phase 1 development. So they already had plans to connect to the town of Leesburg service. So that is why they're already connected, or they're going to be connected to the town of Leesburg for their phase 1, possibly their phase 2 sections. But we have been also speaking to other developers, and those are the lighter blue kind of shaded parcels have come in and talked to us. And those are, again, residential, commercial, data center, all over the board. So we will need to plan for our higher fire flows in those areas. And I just wanted to kind of talk about how we're dividing the two areas because they're kind of two separate areas that we're looking at. So this area up here, kind of northeast of the soccer fields, we're calling JLMA East. And then the area to the west of the ball fields, we're calling JLMA West, and then the TPA. So the difference between the JLMA and the TPA is the transition policy area, or the TPA, is now a part of our central service area. So we have to provide service in that area because it is now part of our central system. The JLMA, however, like Carla said, we're the presumed service provider, but there is a provision for a developer to possibly connect to the town of Leesburg. So those are all the changes that have occurred. So how are we preparing? So the policy language was adopted last summer, and Loudon Water immediately started work on a master plan for water and sewer in the JLMA. And we completed that early this year. And then we kind of thought to ourselves, well, what happens if we don't serve the JLMA or a portion of the JLMA, but we still have to serve the TPA? And how would that look different? So we did a supplement to the master plan for just the transition policy area, and that was completed earlier this year as well. So moving forward, we're currently working on a area facilities plan for the sewer in the JLMA East area, which is that northeast area of the ball fields just south of Route 7. And the area facilities plan is going to take a little closer look than the master plan did at how we intend to sewer that area. So currently, like I said, we have the Goose Creek Industrial Park, which is a small community system that has a wastewater treatment plant. And the wastewater treatment plant is getting old, and we are looking to connect it to the central system anyway. There's currently a task order out there to look at that. So this area facilities plan will look at how would we sewer the whole area, the JLMA with the Goose Creek Industrial Park included, and get it into our central service area. So would we pump across the creek? Would we go down to Trap Rock? Would we use the Russell Branch sewer pump station that is in design currently as well? So looking at those types of things. And we're also currently scoping a similar study for the JLMA West, which will look at sewer. It will look at do we have downstream capacity after we get to Trap Rock? Where will that force main outlet into the central service area? So in addition to those planning studies, we're also internally coordinating. So there's a lot of different people at Loudon Water currently working on the JLMA. So it includes planning. Obviously, planning's been working on these studies. It includes capital design, my group. The Goose Creek Industrial Park study is with capital design, and the Russell Branch sewer pump station as well. And then land development. Any developers that come in and ask questions, they're going to have to know what is the plan and what are we planning. So I've been working on, doing some more internal coordination. And then Mark Peterson has been talking externally to the county, basically to determine what is the schedule and how will we meet these demands. And we've also been talking externally to developers and trying to understand what their schedules are and seeing how we can work together and meet those. So that's how we're preparing. Does anybody have any questions on that before I hand it over to Darren so he can tell you what the master plan said?
Nothing from me.
Ms. Sursakar?
Hi. Yes. Hi. I had a question. I was trying to. I'm trying to think. Did I miss this part where you said there was new language added to the, to the policy in summer 2019? I know I've read all the documents that were forwarded prior to the meeting. I did not get that part when you said new policy has been, inserted. So did I miss that? I mean, I just want to make sure.
So it was part of the comprehensive plan amendment. It was a portion about specifically the Leesburg JLMA, but I did not include it in the write-up, if that's the question.
Okay, yeah, I would really like to see that. Yeah.
We can forward that to you. Have it.
Thank you.
Good morning.
appreciate it.
This is Mark. I just wanted to clarify that policy language
You're breaking. We can't hear you, Mark.
Mark, you seem to be cutting
not
off.
Loudon Water. So
Yeah.
that was the June 9th adoption that the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, Mark, your sound isn't good. But I think it may have been, I may have provided some confusion, Angelina. I'm sorry. When I was talking about that that caveat also that was added to the comp plan, it was all done at the same time. So maybe that was added a little confusion, but we can certainly forward that revised language to you to clear that up.
Thank you. I would really appreciate that. That's a very
No
important component, and I would really like to get a deeper understanding of that. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes. And just before we turn it over to Darren, so I think, one of the main takeaways from these first couple slides is that Loudon Water is going in both of these directions anyway. We're going to the east because we need to address the Goose Creek Industrial Park wastewater treatment plants. So we're headed in that direction. And then, of course, we're headed west because we need to now serve that area of the TPA that was previously in the rural policy area. So again, we're moving forward with our plans. So Kathleen?
All right, so Darren is going to go over what the results of the master plan and the transition policy supplement were, and then we can take questions at the end. Thanks.
Thanks, Kathleen. That was a great intro. If you might remember last year at about this time, I think, we came and requested funding to basically look at this new area in the JLMA and the TPA. It's a very large land area, and one of the first things we did was basically look at what are the proposed land uses in that area and how then could we serve it. We wanted to find out right off the bat, is this possible? Are we going to be able to take this on? What challenges does that pose to our water system? Adding a new large area on the far edges of our system is potentially a challenge because that's an area we have not previously planned to serve. So one of the first things we did was basically look at, so how much water demand or wastewater flow might be generated by these new areas. So we looked at the existing land use where there weren't any development plans. That was most of the TPA, and they proposed some new policy types in the comprehensive plan. We looked at those to see what housing densities might be. We also looked at known development plans, what they looked like last fall, and that included the Microsoft parcel. It also included a couple of those other light blue parcels that Kathleen showed on the map, which are the Tuscarora development, Twin Creeks development. And those developments include, like Kathleen said, all sorts of different land uses, including residential, commercial, data centers, and there's also quarries and some other industrial uses mixed in there. When we added all those up, we got some water demand projections that were significant. The maximum day demand was estimated at about 9 million gallons per day. That's typically one of our numbers that we use to plan around when we're sizing pipes and sizing facilities, is we'll look at our maximum day demand and then we'll actually add a fire flow on top of that, which for the large facilities they're talking about is probably a 3,000 gallon per minute flow. On the wastewater side, we'll do a similar thing where we'll look at the average daily flow that this would generate, and then we will peak that in order to be able to size pipes and pump stations and other associated facilities. So in this area, that one of the big question marks that's to this day still hangs out there is there are multiple data centers proposed, actually proposed obviously associated with Microsoft, but also with Twin Creeks, also with Tuscarora. If those data centers are water cooled, they use a significantly more demand than if they were air cooled or just using basically power to cool things. So there is a lot of uncertainty in these numbers, but we had to take kind of the worst case, the high projections, and say, could we serve this? what kind of impact is that going to have to our system? So the first thing we looked at basically was kind of our really big facilities, treatment plants. Those have a long lead time if we have to make changes to them, but we've found that essentially our treatment plants have capacity or have planned capacity expansions that can serve those areas even at the highest projections. It may impact our timing a little bit. We know that at some point in the future, we're going to upgrade trap rock to be able to treat more water. Maybe we'll push that ahead a couple years. The other big thing that Loudoun Water would definitely have to build and have to work on would be perhaps a water storage tank. We also found that water storage were actually sufficient there. We don't have to build anything, but because of phasing and development plans, it's possible that we may want to add a storage tank to help manage those new facilities. So those are kind of the really big picture things that Loudoun Water would have to be involved in detail. And those are things with a long lead time. So that was really good to hear that, you know, we're well positioned, even though this is an area on the far side of our system. So then we also looked, back up. So then we started looking at kind of the piping, the transmission mains, and we'll get to the sewer in a minute. So we laid out a network and tried to say, could we serve this area? How much might it take for us to serve this area? So we looked at those maximum day demands. We added a fire flow to them and said, could we serve this? How might we serve this? We built a network of pipes that would be proposed. This helps give any developers who are coming in a feel for what might be required. In general, we don't build these pipes. We let developers build these pipes. We don't tend to build a ton of transmission main. Usually that's up to the developers. However, with these larger pipes, and because they may serve multiple areas, we're still working out exactly how much Loudoun Water would be involved. Obviously, we're managing the sizing, we're overseeing the construction, but we don't necessarily get involved in the details of building it. The alignments that I've shown here and on the future maps, these are simply along property lines or roads, kind of easy utility corridors that we could use. It's not intended to be a final design or a final alignment. This was just kind of our first big push to say, can we serve this area? On the, oops, I'm too fast. Sorry about that. Okay. On the wastewater side, it was much the same. We looked at how we could serve this area. When you're looking at wastewater, the key is to try and do as much as possible by gravity, because that doesn't cost you to build a pump station or maintain it or provide power and so on. The most effective way to serve this area is probably through a pair of pump stations, one serving the western area, one serving the east. We did show a pipe crossing kind of along the southern side of the Bolin Park, because there are a few properties along there that might potentially be served, but that would probably be kind of our later stages. So these pump stations would be able to then pump flow back into our existing system. That does cause some issues. When we looked at this, we looked at it and tried to say, can these pipes actually be built? We're looking at, would they have to get too deep? We want to maintain slope without getting incredibly sized or incredibly deep. And it appears, at least from the topography, that yes, this could work. This is not a final design. We didn't actually, go out there and do any survey associated with this, but it's a good feel for the fact that yes, this can work, and we could push all this wastewater into our system. A couple of the bigger questions, especially on the wastewater side, is how we tie this into our system. Right now, the far western side of our system has some of the smallest pipes. There's very little wastewater flow out there, so we don't need any bigger pipes. All of a sudden, we're going to be adding potentially millions of gallons a day of wastewater to our system. So what happens is we have to then push our force main, push that sewer flow a little ways farther into our system. The western pump station would potentially pass Trap Rock and continue on for like almost a mile into our system. Similarly, the eastern pump station would probably also continue quite a ways into our system. This is partly why it gets expensive to build all this out. Building in existing areas can be tricky and more difficult. And this is also why we're looking at some area facility plans that Kathleen mentioned to see how best might we actually integrate this into our system. But we did prove with this first study that yes, it's possible, we can do it, and it could work. So then we also backed up then and said, okay, well, what if we have to serve the TPA as a standalone, the transition policy area? Because that is officially part of our central service area now. So we also did this before we saw any specific development plans out in this area. But we also looked at it and just looked at the land use and said, yes, we can serve this area. The max day for this area is probably more like 1.6 million gallons per day of water. And you can see, because we have Trap Rock right there, it's a fairly easy design or a fairly easy plan to get service. On the wastewater side, it's close to 1 million gallons a day, maybe 900,000 gallons per day. And here you can see we moved the pump station. It's now within the TPA. The force main would run basically either to our facility at Trap Rock. We have a sewer pump station built at the same site there as our Trap Rock water treatment plant. We could either use that or bypass that depending on how development actually occurs. A lot of those questions as to how we incorporate this Trap Rock pump station, and then on the other side, the Goose Creek Industrial Park pump station, the planned Russell Branch pump station. On the wastewater side, that's a lot of how part of our next steps in these area facility plans that Kathleen mentioned. The integration of those different facilities and trying to make the most efficient, effective plan is really what we're aiming for. And then to give a little more guidance to the development community, we are continuing to have a lot of discussions with the development community. It seems like every couple of weeks we're talking to someone. We're also still trying to stay in contact with the county and with the town of Leesburg to make sure that we develop the most feasible, efficient, effective utility plan. We're also looking at how we may possibly work with the development community and how reimbursements could happen. If they come in and build some large infrastructure that may serve more than just their site, there are schedules and plans that we use for reimbursement. There's possibilities that Loudon Water could build part of that. There's still a lot of questions to be figured out and finalized. But we were happy to see that essentially our treatment plants are in a good spot for serving this area. And at least in terms of major facilities, we're in a good spot. With that, I will open it up to any more questions, or thank you for your time.
Are there any questions? Well, hearing none, thanks for the presentation. That was very informative.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing real quick? If you go back, I believe, to the information that was distributed in June, I believe is what Carla said, there was a written summary of some of this same information, and I believe that has text straight from the comprehensive plan, the general plan that has been put out, and that would include the language that you were looking for before, Mrs. Sakar.
So yeah, no, I will look at the comp plan. I was just noting that down. I will definitely take a look at that. But still, I request, my request is still the same, and it stands that if you can just send me the new policy, I will definitely like to take a look at that.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next item. Capital construction report.
Okay, all right. I'm back and I think I've got control. Okay, so I'm here to present the informational item, our capital construction report for the second quarter. As I go through the slides, I'll pause briefly to answer any questions you may have. Okay, Michael, I'm clicking.
Go ahead and double click.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So I've arranged the presentation a little bit differently than in the past. I'm going to begin by talking about the projects that we completed in the second quarter, and then I will move on to talk about the projects that are existing as of the June 30th date. And then I'll close with the what was upcoming as of June 30th, and those projects are now existing. So you'll be hearing more about those in future reports. So I'm starting with the past, then moving to the present, and then the future. We had I guess would be our largest quarter ever in capital construction. We completed $24 million worth of work in the period. Our change orders are less than 1%, and the contingency that we used, we needed less than 15% of the contingency that was available to us. Okay, there we go. Okay, so headlining the projects that we completed in the second quarter would definitely be the Beaver Dam Reservoir project. We opened it to the public at the end of May. Some of you may recall that in May of 2019, we actually began refilling the reservoir. So the refilling process took almost 1 year. So in the that was quite some time given the weather we had last year and into early this year. The photograph that you see before you shows the labyrinth spillway in the foreground, and the embankment portion of the dam is in the background. I've got two photographs here from the Quarry High Wall Stabilization Project. Geostabilization International was our contractor for this project. And this was largely about providing safe access into the quarry as it's being converted into a reservoir. The photograph on the left shows a crane lifting the mesh in place. That's a stabilization mesh that covers the rock face, so that if any rock does break off of the face of the quarry, it is controlled. And then the photograph on the right, you can see some little white dots along the face there. That's the rock anchors that were drilled into the rock. Those are grouted in place, and some of those are 30 feet or so deep. And that stabilizes that entire face. This is our project status at the end of June. These are the projects in construction. We have roughly $45 million worth of work in construction. Right now we're trending at about 1% for the change orders, and we've used less than 20% of the contingency. We're about 84% spent on these projects. A number of these will finish this year, including the horse pen project will be completed this year, and that's our largest project listed there. I will note that 2 of the projects were suspended temporarily in whole or in part as a result of COVID-19. Those suspensions have been lifted, and the contractors have commenced working on those projects again. That includes the Beacon Hill INC project and the horse pen project. So we've worked through that with the contractor, and that was largely for operational and inspection safety for our people. The horse pen project, our contractor is Oscar Renda out of Roanoke. We've completed all of the tunneling for the project, and we're about 97% complete on the open cut sewer. That's our performance for the second quarter. And I'm pleased to report that approximately 2,500 feet of the sewer that was constructed in the project is now in operation. It has been declared substantially complete by Loudon Water. And I'll go through that a little more with an animation, and you'll get to see some of the video as well that was included. Okay, this sewer is shown in green, and the little dots connecting the green lines, those are the manholes. And so this was how the project, this is how the sewer existed before beginning the work at the site. And the contractor constructed the 72-inch, what we call the Brippy 5 sewer, 72-inch diameter sewer. That's in black there. And that was constructed earlier in the project. And to complete the work and do the tie-in, the contractor had to install a bypass pumping system, included 4 pumps, which you'll see in a video shortly, that allowed the contractor to convey the flow around the work site so that the contractor could make that final tie-in, which I'll show in black again, into our sewer system. So everything that you see in black is now in service, and the old sewer has been abandoned in place. So we have 2,500 feet in service now, and the only work remaining is a little bit of gravity sewer for the Horsepen Run portion of the project, which goes all the way to Route 28. The work that's remaining is that little dash portion, because all the work up at Route 28 has been completed, and that work will not go into service as part of this project. That was built for the future, knowing that we would need it in the future, and we wanted to get out ahead of the metro station project. So I'm really happy that we got out in front of that, because this project would be a lot tougher to build if the metro were already in operation. Okay, this is a little video. I took it at the site, and I did it at my wife's request. She's a teacher at the Academy of Engineering and Technology, and she wanted to provide a real life application for her students at school. So she did all the production here, and I really need to give her a lot of credit for that. There is supposed to be some sound with this, but I'm not hearing it.
Ryan, we are working on the sound. We may have to stop control, and Mike will take the control back
Okay, that's fine.
and restart the presentation. Thanks. Bear with us.
Okay. Hello, this is Brian Stone, Loudon Water, and I'm here at the Horsepen Sewer Project, where we are doing a bypass pumping operation from one of our manholes. We are bypassing all of the flow. We're plugging it inside this manhole, and we're pumping it around so we can perform some work on the sewer system downstream of this manhole. Second location, where we have 3 pumps pumping out of this manhole. You can see those connections there, and we call those the dip tubes going into the manhole, and that's into the top of the manhole there. We are actually a little bit below grade here, because we had to go a little bit lower just to make this operation work and stay within the hydraulic performance criteria that we needed. So I'm going to pan around and show you the 3 pumps. First one. And here's our manhole. Second pump is there in the background. And here's our third pump at this location. So we got 4 pumps total pumping here at And all of the pipes from these pumps go into this discharge manifold header. So we've got two pumps that are going here, and then the last of the three pumps on the back side here. I hope you can see that. And we've got everything valved off, so we can isolate if we need to. You can see this header can handle 4 discharge pipes, and only 2 are in use right now in this location, and then we've got the third down here. This is my last video for the day. This is our discharge of our pumps. You can see in this manhole here, and that sound you hear is an air release valve just upstream, and I'm going to walk there so you can see that. And that's allowing sewer gas to escape so that we can continue pumping. Otherwise, we're pumping against a big bubble of air, and eventually that will lock up the system. That's the end. Okay, that's the end of the video, and I think I need to request control again, Michael.
Yes, please.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go. All right, thank you, Michael. I've got 2 still photos of the bypass pumps. This work was all subcontracted out to Sunbelt, and this is was all covered. We had a lot of requirements in the contract to ensure that the contractor understood what he had to do here and how to size the system that he was going to be installing. We have an average daily flow of about 4 million gallons per day. We specified that, and we specified a limit to how much they could actually surcharge this sewer as well for sizing their pumps. They provided this information to us on how they propose to do this bypass operation through the submittal process. So we had a pretty elaborate submittal process to ensure that they understood the work and that they could convey that back to us and how they're going to do it. And it really worked out well for us. We did not have any issues out there, no sewer spills or anything like that. So we're pleased that they could do this and get the sewer tied in, and it went very, very smoothly for us. Okay. I've got, these are the last 2 photos from the BRIPI 5 project. The photo on the left is the old gravity sewer that was to be removed as part of this operation. And then the photo on the right is the new gravity sewer that was constructed as part of this to complete the tie-in. I've just got a couple of photos of the Cortland pump station project. I've got the valve vault shown on the left. Some workers assembling pipe and valves in that vault. And then on the right, I have the communications and electrical duct bank. As Eric mentioned to you earlier, the electrical building is separate from the pump station itself. So one of the things that's a little bit more complicated about this project because of the size of the site is we had to split some things apart that we would normally consolidate together. So we have a lot of duct bank here, conduits to carry the electrical power and the communications to the pump station for the control system. This is the Brambleton pump station. This photograph was taken very close to Ryan Road. You can see this project right off of Ryan Road. Our contractor here is Archer Western, and we have a real challenge in front of us to complete this project. Just by way of status, the contractor could begin testing as early as September next month for this project, and if things were going well, we could even be at substantial completion about early in the 4th quarter this year. But we found out yesterday that Washington Gas will not be providing gas service to this site because of the widening project that the Brambleton Group is undertaking as part of a proffer with Loudoun County. Ryan Road is being widened to 4 lanes, and they are changing the grade significantly on Ryan Road. And Washington Gas, if they installed gas service now, they would have to come back at a later date and reinstall that service. So they are not going to be coming out to provide gas service for us. And that's a real challenge because we have to have gas service for the emergency power generator. The generator is, as specified right now, is a natural gas generator. So with that, we can't we can't start the station up because the generator is required by the code for this project. So we're looking at some different alternatives, including a temporary diesel generator parked at the side of the building. We're looking at a propane blend system to convert this generator from natural gas to propane and providing a propane tank somewhere at the site. We're looking at even swapping this generator out and putting in a diesel generator in the future that would be permanent in itself, and trying to determine if there's any sort of salvage value that we can get from this generator. So I've got some real challenges in front of me on this one. I'm working closely with Nick Figaro. He's our project manager for this project, and we're going to be meeting with O&M, and I think we've got a meeting scheduled this afternoon to discuss the appropriate path forward and try to determine how to work through this.
Brian, we have Mr. Sultan and then Ms. Sursakar's hands up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's start with Ms. Sursakar.
Ryan, thank you. I just wanted to ask you, so if we're putting in a diesel generator because Washington Gas has decided not to go along, with this project, now who is providing that diesel gas generator? Where is it coming from? Who is supporting, this project with that?
We would have to provide that ourselves. This project, the contractor, the generator was specified as a natural gas generator, and they have provided that. We haven't started it up yet, of course, because we don't have natural gas to the site, but the generator's been sitting, it's been in place since late last year. So that is an additional cost that Loudoun Water will incur.
Why were we going with Washington Gas why did we decide to go with Washington Gas again? Please explain.
Well, Washington Gas advised us during the design phase that they could provide gas service to the site. And so we went on information that they provided to us. And it's not that they won't provide it to the site, but it could actually be quite a bit of time down the road. It could be years down the road, depending on the widening project. So this is sort of an unforeseen condition to a degree. I'm not sure the status of or when the widening project was first presented to the county as a proffer, but they had told us early in the project during the design phase that they could provide gas to the site. And our preference would be to use a natural gas generator as opposed to diesel. That would be our preference.
Yes. Okay. All right. Have you reached out to any other alternatives apart from, diesel? Because yes, I have a very good background understanding, preference would obviously with natural gas. Was that the only alternative for us, or is there other avenues that we can sort of, use for natural gas? Because diesel is obviously, I agree with you. It's a little iffy for me too, to have that.
Well, there's a propane blend system that we are looking at now as well, but that would have to be a modification to the generator itself so that it could burn propane, and then we would have to site a propane tank probably on the back side of this station. So that's an alternative as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for providing that background, context. It's just really much helpful to understand. Thank you.
Certainly. Mr. Sultan?
On the back on the bypass air release, have you encountered any odor problems with that air release?
No, it hasn't been that bad. No, and we haven't had any complaints, and it could largely be because of where this is located. This is away from everybody. This is maybe close to a quarter mile or so from the Inova emergency care facility that's located along Loudoun County and the Greenway. But we have not had any complaints, and I didn't detect any odors when I was out there.
Huh. I have one other question. What in the effect on our projects, the two projects by COVID, is a unique situation. What in our contract documents cover that?
Okay, well, our contract documents state we have a no damages for delay provision in our contract documents, and we also have a suspension provision in our documents as well. Epidemics is actually covered in our documents as an excusable delay. It's not a compensable delay, but it's an excusable delay. It's along with an act of God, those sorts of things. So we're covered there. we suspended the project on a short-term basis. We can suspend for up to 90 days, but this suspension was far less than that. We suspended on a short-term basis just to allow the contractor to get ahead far enough, or to allow our guys to get ahead far enough that they would not be in contact with the contractor. So it's really largely somewhat about social distancing as well with our forces. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just curious.
Okay.
No other questions? Keep going.
Okay. I've got
Thank you.
Okay. I've got two photographs here from the Brambleton project. These are both photographs in the dry well that show the pumps and some of the piping that has been installed. I've got a little bit here on the submittal review cost for this project through June. I'm hearing music or okay. Okay, I've got some upcoming projects here. That's the end of the current project. So the upcoming projects include the Sugarland Run Phase 2 valve replacement project, which we bid back a few months ago, and we've actually issued the notice to proceed to the contractor. That's just under $100,000, and that will be completed this fall. The Upper Foley generator replacement project, which the board approved a few months ago, that will be completed in the middle of next year. And of course, the Broad Run expansion project, which will be completed in 2024. The total of these projects is a little over $76 million. In terms of the expansion, our contractor there is Corman Kokosing. The contract was executed on July 22nd. That's the date that Carla signed it. We conducted the pre-construction conference 3 weeks ago, and the notice to proceed was effective Monday of last week. So we expect them to be mobilizing to the site within the next few weeks, and we are told that they are going to begin the erosion control work at the site possibly next week. So at least in early September. Okay, are there any questions? Okay, well, thank you.
Mr. Sultan, is your microphone muted, sir?
Okay, next item. It's a very good, thorough report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bear with us as we get that report up on the screen. Thank you.
So as we get the item up, good morning all. I think the final item that we have today is our monthly capital spending report. With this being August and just past the mid-year, our capital spending report now includes a reprojection for the second half of the year. And as soon as we get that up, you should see that on the graph. I believe that our spending currently through July is at about 90% of what we had projected from the budget that was put together for the year. And then whoever has control, is it possible that, let me see if I can. There we go. So there is the current spending through the mid-year, and then the dash represents the reforecast for the second half of the year. And you can see here on the table, there is the capital spending plan, the original budget request for $73 million, and the reforecast for just shy of $65 million. And you could see the projection for the mid-year was 37 million, and our spending is at just about 34 million, or about 90%. And I believe that our reforecast for the end of the year right now projects that we will finish right at about 89 to 90% of what the original request of $73 million was. So if there's any questions, I'd certainly be happy to try to answer them on the current spending or the reforecast. Yes, sir, Mr. Kobelis.
Yeah, can you go down to the second part?
I sure can. To this table?
Yeah. So what were the reasons why? Is there something that just, or is it just normal was the change? Or is there anything that was outstanding why we have to reforecast?
I mean, we go through the exercise every year, but in terms of the change in 65 or 64.5 million versus 73, on the second page here, hopefully this corrects itself. It seems like I'm not getting it here on the screen, but there's a explanation in the PDF file on the second page. Let me see if I can quickly bring that up. I tried to categorize the delta there of the about $9 million. My recollection was about 4 to 5 million of that is money that we had projected last. You remember when we did this initial budget, it's actually built in the September timeframe. We're actually just starting on next year's budget. So sometimes what happens is, especially on construction projects, a budget for the following year is established in September. And then sometimes the contractors actually speed up towards the end of the year and get some work done in that year that we're actually building the budget, and they don't need the money in the following year like we had forecasted. And for a couple of the projects that are finishing this year, like Horsepen, and there was one other project, I can't recall at the moment which one, there was an over forecast and over budgeting, if you will, this year because we didn't think they were going to get as much work done in the tail end of last year. And then there was also a few projects this year that we just didn't end up needing the budget. It might have been that the bids came in a little lower on some projects, or there were some changes in the overall project that caused us to no longer need that budget money. Like we were able to cut a project short and cut some scope out of it. Those projects totaled about $5 million that really reduced. In other words, if we knew now what we knew last September, we would have come in and asked for 68 million, not 73 million. And then the rest of that in between there, sort of the balance of the $4 to $5 million is really probably mostly attributed to just some projects that are generally falling at a slower pace than what we had anticipated. And that money that we budgeted this year that we won't spend, I would say that other balance would be something that we would rebudget in the CIP forecast for next year. I don't know if that's helpful. It's a little hard without the graph, the table up there. Maybe you can see it in your version of board docs, but I can certainly entertain any specific projects or questions on specific projects if you had any.
No, Tom, I'm very happy with a small amount as we've reforecasted. I didn't realize there was a third page. I just pulled it up and it's a great explanation. So I didn't realize that third page was there. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know. It's just today's technology seems like to not like PDFs sometimes. So, okay, if there's any other questions, I'd be happy. Otherwise, I'd return it back to you.
There, you've got it now, Tom. Third page is showing.
Yeah. Well, if that's all, then I turn it back to you, Mr. Sultan.
Mr. Sultan? Is your microphone?
Let's move on to the agenda.
Mr. Sultan, I think the only item left was to talk about the scheduling of the next CIP meeting. As you and I chatted, I think that we scheduled it on September 30th, maybe a little bit in error. We normally try to provide a 2-month cushion between the CIP meeting and the board meeting. And we kind of inadvertently scheduled the meeting for next CIP on the 30th of September, which is only about a week in front of the board meeting. So the question was whether or not it would be okay to propose backing the meeting back up a week to September 23rd, therefore providing the 2 weeks between the CIP and the board. And it does help with especially with Jewel and some of the preparing for the board meeting and wrapping up the meeting minutes and so forth. So if it would be possible, it would be great to move it back to September 23rd, but if it can't be, we can make September 30th work as well.
No, let's move it to September 23rd. That's fine. Let's move it back to September 23rd. That's fine.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If that's the last thing on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
That's
That's
the
it.
last thing on the. Can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
I second that,
Oh.
Angeline.
Thank you. I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar,
Yes.
and Mr. Sultan.
Yes.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 9:56 a.m.